Welcome back to Biography Central. In a world often dominated by intellectual prowess and scholarly pursuits, what if the true path to enlightenment lies in simplicity and sincerity? In this episode, we delve into the diverse tapestry of devotees who surrounded Ramana Maharshi, illustrating how profound truth can emerge not from intellectual debates, but from genuine, heartfelt devotion. While many seekers flocked to Maharshi seeking wisdom, it was the simplicity and sincerity of the heart that truly resonated with him. From renowned scholars to humble devotees, each individual had a unique journey, yet they all shared one common thread: the quest for deeper understanding and connection with the divine. As we explore their stories, we'll uncover the essence of true devotion and how it transcends the confines of intellectualism. Chapter 15. The Devotees. On the whole, the devotees were very normal people. By no means all were scholars or intellectuals. In fact, it not infrequently happened that some intellectual preoccupied with his theories would fail to perceive the living truth and drift away, while some simple person would remain and worship, and by his sincerity, draw on himself the grace of Bhagwan. Because self-inquiry is called Jnanamarga, the path of knowledge, it is sometimes supposed that only intellectuals can follow it, but what is meant is understanding of the heart, not theoretical knowledge. Theoretical or doctrinal knowledge may be a help, but it may equally well be a hindrance. Sri Bhagwan wrote, "What avails the learning of those who do not seek to wipe out the letters of fate by asking, whence is the birth of us who know the letters? They have made themselves like a gramophone. What else are they? O Arunachala." It is the unlearned who are saved rather than those whose ego has not subsided despite their learning. Supplementary 40 verses 35 to 36. The words about wiping out the letters of fate refer to the Hindu conception of a man's destiny being written upon his brow and mean the same, therefore, as transcending one's karma. They are a further confirmation of what was said in Chapter 5, that the doctrine of destiny does not take away the possibility of effort, or indeed the necessity for it. Learning was not condemned in itself, just as material wealth and psychic powers were not. Only, with all three alike, the desire for them and preoccupation with them were condemned as blinding a man and distracting him from the true goal. As is stated about psychic powers in an ancient text already quoted, they are like ropes to tether a beast. It was sincerity that was required, not brilliance; understanding, not theory; humility, not mental pride. Particularly when songs were sung in the hall, one would see this. Noticing the perfunctory interest Sri Bhagwan might show to some celebrity, and the radiance of his grace showered on one who sang with true devotion, even if with little skill. Naturally, Hindus were the most numerous among the devotees, but there were many others also. None did more to spread knowledge of Sri Bhagwan through the world than Paul Brunton with his book, A Search in Secret India. Among the permanent residents in or around the ashram in later years were Major Chadwick, large, military and benevolent, with a booming voice; Mrs. Talyar Khan, a Parsi lady with an imperious nature and the air of a grande dame; S.S. Cohen from Iraq, quiet and unobtrusive; Dr. Hafiz Syed, a retired professor of Persian, with something of the old-world charm of a Muslim aristocrat. Visitors came for longer or shorter periods from America, France, Germany, Holland, Czechoslovakia, Poland, from many lands. Vishwanathan, a younger relative of Sri Bhagwan, came in 1923 as a 19-year-old youth and remained. It was not his first visit, but this time as soon as he entered the hall, Sri Bhagwan asked him, "Have you taken leave of your parents?" The question was a recognition that this time he had come to stay. He admitted that, like Sri Bhagwan himself, he had simply left a note, not saying where he was going. Sri Bhagwan made him write a letter, but in any case the youth's father guessed where he had gone and came to talk it over. He had an open mind about it. He had heard glowing reports of the Swami, but he had known him as a younger relative in the days when he was Venkataraman and naturally found it hard to conceive of him as divine. Coming into the presence, his body quivered with awe, and he had fallen on his face before he knew it had happened. "I see nothing of the old Venkataraman here," he exclaimed. And Sri Bhagwan laughed. "Oh, that fellow! He disappeared long ago." Speaking to Vishwanathan in his usual humorous way, Sri Bhagwan once said, At least you knew Sanskrit when you left home. When I left home, I knew nothing. There were others also who knew Sanskrit and had studied the scriptures, among them the retired Professor Mulla Venkataramaya, compiler of talks with Sri Ramana Maharshi, who lived as a sadhu and for some years kept an ashram diary, and the schoolmaster Sundaresha Iyer, already referred to, who carried on his profession in Thiruvannamalai. In the same year as Vishwanathan, Muruganar also came, one of the foremost of Tamil poets. Sri Bhagwan himself would sometimes refer to his poems or have them read out. It was he who put together the 40 verses and made a book of them, and he has also written an outstanding Tamil commentary on them. The musician Manavasi Ramaswamy Iyer is a still older devotee. Senior in years to Sri Bhagwan, he came to him first in 1907. He also composed beautiful songs in praise of the master. Ramaswamy Pillai came as a youth straight from college in 1911 and stayed. Like Vishwanathan and Muruganar, he remained a sadhu. However, in his case the path was rather through devotion and service. Once in 1947, Sri Bhagwan injured his foot on a stone during his daily walk on the hill. Next day, Ramaswamy Pillai, gray-haired already but still robust, set out to make steps and a path up the hillside. Single-handed he worked from dawn to dusk, day after day until the path was finished, the edges firmly shored up with stone, steps chiseled out where there was a rock platform, built up where there was an earthen slope. It was well and thoroughly constructed, so thoroughly that the monsoon rains have not washed it away since. However, it has not been kept in repair because shortly after it was finished, Sri Bhagwan's failing health compelled him to give up his walks on the hill. Ranga Iyer, the old school friend already referred to, never settled down at Thiruvannamalai, but he and his family used to come on frequent visits. He had studied in the same class as Sri Bhagwan and had played and wrestled with him, and he always enjoyed great freedom in talking and joking. Coming in the early Virupaksh days to see what his old friend looked like as a Swami, he immediately recognized that he stood before divinity. Not so his elder brother Mani. He stood looking scornfully at the young Swami he had known as a junior at school. Sri Bhagwan returned the look, and under the impact Mani fell at his feet. After that he also became a devotee. One of Ranga Iyer's sons wrote a long Tamil poem celebrating the marriage of Sri Bhagwan with divine knowledge, jnana. A large part of Maharshi's gospel was compiled from conversations with the Polish refugee, M. Friedman. Two Polish ladies are well-known figures at the ashram. When Mrs. Noy had to return to her native America, she could not restrain her tears. Sri Bhagwan consoled her. "Why do you weep? I am with you wherever you go." It is true of all Bhagwan's devotees. He is always with them. If they remember him, he will remember them. Even if they let go of him, he will not let go of them. Nevertheless, to have it said to one personally was a great blessing. My 3 children, the only European children at Thiruvannamalai, were conspicuous among the devotees. One evening in December 1946, Sri Bhagwan initiated the 2 elder of them into meditation. And if their efforts to describe it fail, so do those of older people. Kitty, who was 10, wrote, "When I was sitting in the hall this evening, Bhagwan smiled at me, and I shut my eyes and began to meditate. As soon as I shut my eyes, I felt very happy and felt that Bhagwan was very, very near to me and very real, and that he was in me. It wasn't like being happy and excited about anything. I don't know what to say, simply very happy, and that Bhagwan is so lovely." And Adam, who was 7, wrote, "When I was sitting in the hall, I didn't feel happy, so I began to pray, and I felt very happy, but not like having a new toy, just loving Bhagwan and everyone. Not that children sat often or long hours in the hall. When they felt like it, they sat. More often they played about. When Frania, the youngest child, was 7, the other 2 were talking about their friends, and she, having no real friends yet but not wanting to be left out, said that Dr. Syed was the best friend she had in the world. Sri Bhagwan was told, "Ah," he replied with perfunctory interest. And her mother said, "What about Bhagwan?" "Ah." This time he turned his head and showed real interest. Frania said, "Bhagwan is not in the world." "Ah." He sat upright with an expression of delight, placing his forefinger against the side of his nose in a manner he had when showing surprise. He translated the story into Tamil and repeated it delightedly to others who entered the hall. Later, Dr. Syed asked the child where Bhagwan was if not in the world, and she replied, "He is everywhere." Still he continued in Quranic vein, "How can we say that he is not a man in the world like us when we see him sitting on the couch and eating and drinking and walking about?" And the child replied, "Let's talk about something else." And yet any mention of devotees is invidious because there are always others who could be mentioned. For instance, few spoke with Sri Bhagwan more freely than Devaraja Mudliyar or than T.P. Ramachandra Iyer, whose grandfather had once taken the young Sri Ramana by main force to a ceremonial meal in his house, the only house in which he ever took food after his arrival at Thiruvannamalai. Many beautiful pictures of Sri Bhagwan, showing incredible variety of expression, were taken by Dr. T.N. Krishnaswamy, who used to come on occasional visits from Madras. Some of the most vivid and delightful accounts of incidents at the ashram, breathing the charm of Sri Bhagwan's presence, are contained in letters written in Telugu by a lady devotee, Nagamasai, to her brother D.S. Sastry, a bank manager at Madras. Again, there were devotees who seldom or never found it necessary to speak to Sri Bhagwan. There were householders who came whenever occasion permitted from whatever town or country their destiny had placed them in, and others who paid one short visit and remained thenceforth disciples of the Master, though not in his physical presence. And some there were who never saw him, but received the silent initiation from a distance. Sri Bhagwan discouraged anything eccentric in dress or behavior and any display of ecstasy. It has already been shown how he disapproved of the desire for visions and powers, and how he preferred householders to strive in the conditions of family and professional life. He evoked no spectacular changes in the devotees, for such changes may be a superstructure without foundation and collapse later. Indeed, it sometimes happened that a devotee would grow despondent, seeing no improvement at all in himself, and would complain that he was not progressing. In such cases, Sri Bhagwan might offer consolation, or he might retort, "How do you know there is no progress?" And he would explain that it is the guru, not the disciple, who sees the progress made. It is for the disciple to carry on perseveringly with his work, even though the structure being raised may be out of sight of the mind. It may sound a hard path, but the disciple's love for Bhagwan and the graciousness of his smile gave it beauty. Any exaggerated course, such as mauna or silence, was also discouraged. On at least one occasion, Sri Bhagwan made this very clear. Hearing that Major Chadwick intended to go Mountie next day, he spoke at length against the practice, pointing out that speech is a safety valve and that it is better to control it than to renounce it, and making fun of people who give up speaking with their tongue and speak with a pencil instead. The real mauna is in the heart, and it is possible to remain silent in the midst of speech, just as it is to remain solitary in the midst of people. Sometimes it is true there was exaggeration. In accordance with the concealed nature of his upadesha, explained in a previous chapter, Sri Bhagwan would seldom explicitly bid or forbid, and yet those who embarked on any exaggerated course must have felt his disapproval, even if they did not admit it to themselves, for they almost invariably began absenting themselves from the hall. I recollect one such case where the mental balance was threatened and Sri Bhagwan said explicitly, "Why does she not come to me?" One has to know how scrupulously he avoided giving explicit instructions or telling anyone to come or go, how skillfully he parried any attempt to maneuver him into doing so, how binding and how precious the slightest indication of his will was considered, in order to appreciate the significance of such a saying. In this case, the devotee did not come, and shortly afterwards her mind was unhinged. This was not the only instance. Despite the air of normality, the terrific force radiating from Sri Bhagwan was too potent for some who came. It was noticeable that, in any such case, as soon as the mental balance had been destroyed, the person would cease to seclude himself and begin coming to the ashram. It was also noticeable that Sri Bhagwan would sometimes scold such a person like a naughty child who had permitted himself some indulgence that he could and should have resisted. In a fairly high proportion of cases, a fight began to be put up under his influence and the sufferer struggled back to normality. Although such cases have to be mentioned in order to complete the picture, it should not be imagined from the space bestowed on them that they were at all frequent. They always remained rare. It is hard to postulate anything definite about the methods of Sri Bhagwan because exceptions can often be found. There were cases when his instructions were explicit, especially if one could approach him alone. Anant Narayan Rao, a retired veterinary surgeon who had built a house near the ashram, had several times been summoned urgently to Madras where his brother-in-law was seriously ill. On one occasion, he received a telegram to this effect, and, although it was late in the evening, took it straight to Sri Bhagwan. Previously, he had never paid much attention, but this time he said, "Yes, yes, you must go," and he began speaking of the unimportance of death. Rao went home and told his wife that this time the disease must be fatal. They reached Madras a couple of days before his brother-in-law passed away. One heard occasionally of more dynamic instances also, such as a devotee being instructed to use the name Ramana as an invocation, but they were never much spoken about. Usually a devotee would himself take a decision and then announce it tentatively. The deciding was a part of his sadhana. If it was rightly done, there would be a smile of approval that made the heart sing, perhaps a brief verbal consent. If the decision was not approved, that also would usually be visible. A householder once announced his decision to leave Thiruvannamalai for some other town where he could get a better paid job. Sri Bhagwan laughed. Everyone is free to make plans. The plan did not come off. When one of India's political leaders went to Madras to hold meetings, an attendant who was an admirer of his asked leave to go there. Sri Bhagwan sat with a face like stone, as though he had not heard. Nevertheless, the attendant went. He rushed from meeting to meeting, arriving always too late or failing to obtain admission. And when he got back, Sri Bhagwan teased him about it. "So you went to Madras without permission? Did you have a successful trip?" So completely devoid of ego was he that he could talk or joke about his own actions as naturally and impersonally as about those of anyone else. The influence of Sri Bhagwan was to turn one from the pleasure and pain, the hope and anxiety that are caused by circumstances to the inner happiness that is one's true nature, and realizing this, there were devotees who never asked for anything, even in mental prayer, but strove instead to overcome the attachment that gives rise to wishes. Even though they had not completely succeeded, it would have seemed a sort of betrayal to go to Sri Bhagwan with a request for outer benefits, for anything but greater love, greater steadfastness, greater understanding. If afflictions came, the method was not to seek to get them removed, but to ask, "To whom is this affliction? Who am I?" and thus draw nearer to conscious identity with that which suffers neither birth nor death nor any affliction. And if any turned to Sri Bhagwan with that intention, peace and strength would flow into him. Human nature being what it is, there were also devotees who did ask Sri Bhagwan for help and protection in the events of life. Taking a different point of view, they looked upon him as their father and mother and turned to him whenever any trouble or danger threatened. Either they would write a letter telling him about it or simply pray to him, wherever they might be, and their prayers were answered. The trouble or danger would be averted, or, in cases where that was not possible or beneficial, peace and fortitude would flow into them to endure it. Help came to them spontaneously, with no volitional intervention on the part of Sri Bhagwan. That does not mean that it was due merely to the faith of the devotee. It was due to the grace that emanated from him in response to the faith of the devotee. Some devotees were puzzled by this use of power without volition and sometimes even without mental knowledge of the conditions. Devaraja Mudliar has recorded how he once questioned Sri Bhagwan about it. If, in the case of Bhagwan, as in that of all Nanis, the mind has been destroyed and he sees no beta, otherness, but only the one self, how can he deal with each separate disciple or devotee and feel for him or do anything for him? I asked Bhagwan about this and added, "It is evident to me and many others with me here that when we intensely feel about any of our troubles and appeal to Bhagwan mentally from wherever we happen to be, help comes almost instantaneously. A man comes to Bhagwan, some old devotee of his. He proceeds to relate all sorts of troubles he has had since he last met Bhagwan. Bhagwan listens to his story patiently and sympathetically, occasionally even expressing wonder and interjecting, 'Oh, is that so?' and so on. The story often ends. When all else failed, I finally appealed to Bhagwan, and Bhagwan alone saved me." Bhagwan listens to all this as though it was news to him, and even tells others who come later. It seems such and such things have happened to so and so since he was last with us. We know that Bhagwan never pretends, so he is apparently not aware of all that has happened, at least on one plane, until he is told. At the same time, it is clear to us that the moment we are in anguish and cry for help, he hears us and sends help in one way or another, at least by giving fortitude or other facilities for bearing the trouble that has descended on us if for some reason it cannot be averted or modified. When I put all this to Bhagwan, he replied, "Yes, all that happens automatically." It was very rarely that Sri Bhagwan deliberately used supernatural powers. Moreover, if he did, so it was as concealed as his initiation and upadesha. In the later years, there was one householder among the attendants, a Rajagopala Iyer. He had a son of about 3 who had been given the name of Ramana, a pleasant little fellow who used to run and prostrate to Sri Bhagwan daily. One evening, after the devotees had dispersed for the night, the child was bitten by a snake. Rajagopala Iyer picked him up and ran straight to the hall. Even so, the child was already blue and gasping by the time he got there. Sri Bhagwan passed his hands over him and said, "You are all right, Ramana." And he was all right. Rajagopala Iyer told a few of the devotees, but it was not much talked about, although they shade into one another. A distinction has to be drawn between asking for boons and relying on Sri Bhagwan for one's protection and welfare. The latter he certainly approved of. If any cast the burden of their welfare on him, he accepted it. In Akshara Munamalai he wrote, depicting the attitude of the disciple to the Guru, "Didst thou not call me in? I have come in, and my maintenance is now thy burden." He once, on the request of a devotee, selected 42 verses from the Bhagavad Gita and arranged them in a different sequence to express his teaching. And among them was the verse, "I undertake to protect and secure the welfare of those who, without otherness, meditate on me and worship me and ever abide thus attuned." There may be severe trials and periods of faith-testing insecurity, but a devotee who puts his trust in Sri Bhagwan is always looked after. In our ongoing series on Ramana Maharshi, we've been looking into his life, teachings, and the timeless wisdom he shared. In the next episode, we'll dive deeper into his written works, exploring how these few but powerful pieces of literature serve as guideposts for self-inquiry and spiritual growth. Discover how poetry and prose flowed from his consciousness to inspire generations of seekers. Don't miss this chance to connect with the words of a true sage. Tune in to understand how his writings can lead you toward the essence of who you truly are. Thank you for listening till the end. Please subscribe, turn on the notifications, like, comment, and share with your friends. This will help more listeners to discover our channel and content.